Hey, welcome back to Diode Press. I'm Graham. So today's video is going to be the first in a series of how to make a woodblock print. So this series will be listed in a playlist on the YouTube channel, so you can easily jump around to the different videos. And I also want to mention, this is the way that I make woodblock prints. It's kind of how I learned in school and through books and kind of on my own trial and error. So it's not necessarily the only way to do it, everyone does things differently. So I did my best to keep the video series really simple and kind of stick to the basics. So if you're new to woodblock printmaking, you can pick it up and make a print. But if you're a more experienced woodblock printmaker, you might be able to pick up something here or there. So there's a lot of ways to go about making a woodblock print, more traditional ways and also non-traditional. So it's worth doing some research and watching some videos and kind of find out what you like the best and then go from there. So generally speaking, the materials you need to make a woodblock print are pretty inexpensive. So if it's your first one and you make it and you're not happy with it, the worst that happened is you got some practice using the tools and materials and you can start again. And also I want to mention in these videos when I'm talking about woodblock or woodcut prints, I'm talking about rolling the ink onto a carved block and printing it onto paper either by hand or with a press. I'm not talking about traditional Japanese woodblock printmaking using ink, pigments, and paste. So I have so much respect for that technique and I'd love to try my hand at it one day. And so if you're curious about that technique or you just want to see an amazing printmaker, I'll put a link down in the description box to David Bull's videos over on YouTube. He's an amazing printer making traditional woodblock prints. So today's video is going to cover some of the materials you'll need to make a woodcut print. So the wood, paper, and then some inks you can use. And also some of the tools you'll need to make a woodcut and the different marks that those tools can make. And so in the next video, I'll talk about drawing your image and how to transfer it easily onto a block. Video 3 will be about carving and then printing a one-color block using either a printing press or doing it by hand. And finally, video 4 will be taking it one step further and adding multiple blocks to the print to get a multiple color woodcut print. So at the end of each video, I'll have links to the other videos in the series, and also in the description box of the video, I'll have those links, as well as a link to a blog post with all the materials listed out that I used in this series. Okay, so now all that's out of the way, let's talk about the materials you'll need to go ahead and make your first woodcut print. So you can use really any wood you want for woodcut printmaking if you're printing it by hand, but you'll have a much better time if you're using something made specifically for printmaking. So you can run it through the press and it's nice and flat, or even printing by hand, you'll have much better luck if it's a nice flat piece of wood. So my top choice for about 90% of the woodcuts I do is Sheena plywood, and so I use the 1/4 inch thickness. So this is a thin plywood from Japan, and it allows you to carve in any direction without having to worry so much about the grain pattern of the wood. It's great for most prints, but it's a fairly soft wood, so it's great for carving, but it also means, it's hard to get the really fine line detail that you might want. So it comes in a few different thicknesses, so there's a 1/4 inch thick here, and I'm not sure, this is just the next size up, I think it's 3/8 inch thick, and so you can get a thicker block, so it bends less, and you can carve on both sides of the block, like I did here, to save on some material. But there are some downsides to doing that, and I'll get into that in the next videos. But the best part about this is it's really inexpensive wood to use. So the next type of wood that I use from time to time is cherry plywood. I don't have any on hand right now, but it's essentially a thin layer of cherry and then it's on a plywood stack of birch. It's a little bit more expensive than Sheena ply, but it holds a lot finer detail and it's a lot harder of a wood. But being a bit of a harder wood, it takes a little bit more effort to carve and your tools need to be a little bit sharper as well. And so I'll link to that as well. And the last material that a lot of people use is MDF, or medium density fiberboard. And I don't really use MDF for any of my printmaking unless I have a really specific reason to use it. Like I want like a really huge sheet of wood and it's really cheap. And so since it's a fiberboard, it's, there's no grain to the wood, so you can carve in any direction you want. But it also doesn't hold a very fine line. You can get pretty good lines, but not the super fine lines that you could with like a cherry or any kind of hardwood block. So there's a couple downsides to using MDF. So the first one is it's fiberboard that's glued together under heat and pressure. So there's a lot of glue in the material that's going to dull out your tools really quick. The second problem is there's a lot of chemicals in MDF. So it has formaldehyde and things that you don't want to be breathing if you're sanding it or if you're cutting it up. So unless you have a good reason to use it, I would probably try to skip it. Okay, so moving on to papers. So there's really a lot of choices with papers. There's hundreds of different kinds of papers you can print with. And it's probably really best to kind of experiment around with what you like and, try different kinds and see what works best for you. So if you go somewhere like Blick or McLean's, they often sell like sample paper packs. You can try out a whole bunch of different kinds of papers and really get a feel for what you like. But so generally speaking, there's two types of printmaking paper. So there's the Western papers and then the Japanese printmaking paper. So Japanese papers are handmade typically and extremely thin. And they're used for traditional woodblock printmaking, and you can use them for woodcuts. And if you're printing by hand, they pick up all the detail great, and they work great in a press too. So they're definitely worth trying out and see how you like them. And so this is a lithograph I printed on Japanese paper. And so you can see the fibers of the paper, and it's super thin, so you can almost see your hand through the paper. And then here I have the same print printed on a Western paper. So this is BFK Reeves paper. And so it's, you know, much thicker of a paper. So it's just a different look, different feel, and you really need to try it out and see which one you like the best between the Western and the Japanese papers. So definitely test around. And like I said, for most of my woodblock prints, I'm using BFK Reeves paper. And you can find this at Blick or, you know, most printmaking stores or even just art stores carry BFK paper. For the print that I'll be doing in this series, I'm going to be using Zirkle Bookweight Smooth paper. And it's also it's thinner than the BFK paper. And you can get BFK in a thin version, which is great for if you're hand printing. But I'm using the Zirkle paper for this project. I bought a bunch from my last project, so I thought I'd use it up. But it's super thin, and it should really pick up the detail nice. So again, if you're going to be printing by hand, I definitely recommend a Japanese thin paper or a thinner version of one of the Western papers. It'll make life a lot easier. And if you're going to be printing by press, then really any paper will work fine. Usually a smoother paper is what I try to go for though. So ink is another place you can really explore and try different kinds. You know, so there's water-based ink and oil-based ink. I prefer the oil-based ink for my relief printmaking. I mean, it's really not too much work to clean up. And so for this project, I'm going to be using a Gamblin relief ink. You know, so they sell it in cans, you know, jars, tubes, all different ways. And to clean up, I usually just wear gloves. And then I use some this odorless turpenoid, which is a turpentine substitute. And that and some simple green and a paper towel, and it cleans up really easily. Or you can also, you know, go the non-toxic route, and there's all sorts of resources online that cover non-toxic inks and how to clean up, and I'll put a link in the description box as well for a great website with non-toxic resources. If you're going to try the water-based ink route, I'd try a few different brands and see what you like best. They're typically sold in small tubes, so I would try out a few before you really commit to buying like a big jar like this of, you know, like I have the oil ink here. You'll find one might print really great and another one might not work out so well. Okay, so now we've quickly covered papers and inks, and so now it's time to talk about tools. So you don't want to use the same tools that you'd use for like a lino cut tools, like the little plastic handle with the bits you can find. I don't think they'll hold up too well. You want to get something kind of made for woodcut. So people have all sorts of preferences for tools, just like papers and inks. And I've gone through really a ton of different tools and landed at my favorites so far. So you can start with like a really cheap set of tools. I think, you know, there's a couple different styles that kind of look like this, and they'll work great, but you might find yourself having to sharpen them more often than you'd like. My most recent tools I'm using are these Dockyard micro tools. So they come in a variety of different sizes, you know, for all different line types. And it's great for the kind of the small prints I end up doing and lots of detail. You know, they have just almost like microscopic tools here, and they work great. And I also use this OCCT 1-inch sweep gouge here to clean out some really large areas of a print. You know, it has a really wide size here, and it cleans out areas just in no time. So, you know, a wider U-gouge would also work as well. The other tools I use here are the Namaste. I'm sure I'm not saying that correctly, but they're from McLean Printmaking. So they sell a set of them. I think it's about $60, but you can also just get one or two of them and, you know, give them a try. And so here you have a flat blade tool, you know, the knife tool, and then it has a larger V-gouge, and then a bunch of different sizes of the U-gouges, and then it has a flat tool here that you can use to clean out areas. So it's a great set, and I use that predominantly and then also mix in with the micro tools. And finally, this last little V-gouge here is from McLean's as well. And I don't know how to pronounce the name of it, but it's probably much more than you'd ever need. I don't think I use it enough to justify the price of buying it, but it's just a really nice V-gouge, and the metal is super sharp, and it just stays sharp forever. So, you know, it is a good investment. And so again, just get the tools you can afford. So you'll want to get, you know, a V-gouge here to make some nice line work, a couple of these U-gouges, you know, any brand really to clean out bigger areas or make thicker lines and patterns. And then beyond that, you know, I mean, you can get smaller gouges, or if you like the look of the micro tools, and they have the different shapes for those. But you only need a couple tools to really get started. And so I'll quickly go over some of the marks you can make with these different tools. So the V-gouge here, obviously it's to make lines. So if you go through the wood, you get a nice V that'll print a nice, you know, straight line, or you can use curved lines. And so this is the larger V tool that I use. And this is the Dockyard V tool. You know, it'll make a little bit bigger of a mark here. And then with the smallest tool, You can make really tiny fine lines. So those are your V-tools. And then for U-gouges, they come in all different sizes as well. So this is a 3mm U-gouge. You can see here the shape that it makes. So a lot of people like the look of seeing all the different tool marks in your print versus, clean kind of blocked out areas. So you can use different size tools and different shape tools to get different patterns throughout your wood. And it's really just about using, different tools and getting the look that you want and the line work that you're going for. And then if you have a really large area that you need to clean out, you can either use a large U-gouge here and clean out bigger areas, or if you have, a really large area, you can use a tool like this and really just clean it out in no time. And this will make quick work of a whole block if you're not careful. So now when you're making a woodblock print, you're going to be using sharp tools, knives and tools, and the sharper the better. So in these videos, I'm just demonstrating how I make prints, and you'll need to make sure to follow, all the safety guidelines with your tools and equipment, and, always be safe when you're doing this stuff. But I mean, the most important thing is to always make sure that when you're cutting away from yourself. You don't want to be holding the block over here and then carving over here, because these tools are sharp, but sometimes they'll pop out of the wood and you'll just stab yourself right in your finger or your hand or your arm or your leg or whatever, however you're holding the block. So if you're holding it, you want to make sure you're cutting away. Or you can use this drawer liner fabric. It's like a foam material, and it kind of sticks down like that, and it'll hold the block a little bit better. So you can use that and then carve your material away. But even then, when you're using like a bigger U-gouge or something and clearing a large area, it's easier for these to start to slip, or if this pops out, you're pressing really hard, you'll slice your finger really good. So always be really careful. The best way to go, though, is to use a bench hook. So a bench hook is exactly what it sounds like. So it's hooks onto your desk. And so the bench hook has a lip here that sits right on the edge of your desk. And then it has a bar back here. So you can rest your block right up against this. And so now when you're carving, you don't have to hold the back at all. You can just push against the wood, and all the force is being transferred to the edge of your desk. And you can also put the block in the middle here and be able to rotate around to get to different angles. So that way, no matter what, you're not having to worry about stabbing yourself in the fingers. It just takes a lot of stress off woodblock, woodcut printmaking. And so they sell bench hooks like this online. And so I'll put a link in the description box, with the material list. But I also have a separate video of how to make one of these. And as you can see, it's really easy. It's 3 pieces of wood that are essentially just glued and nailed together. So I'll have a link to that, and you can make your own. Shouldn't take long at all. And so as I mentioned, it's really important to keep the tools really sharp. And so normally when you buy them, they come pretty sharp. But to keep them that way, you have to use a sharpening strobe. So this is one I got from McLean Printmaking. So it's a leather strip here on the block, and then it comes with a compound. And so you apply the compound onto this. And then as you're working, about every 10 minutes or so, I'll stop and you just run your tools across the compound and the leather. And what it does, it's like it polishes up the edge of your tools, and it keeps them really sharp and just in good shape. So if you do this all the time while you're working, you don't have to worry about sharpening them that often. And so this kind of flat one works great with bigger tools, or even like the larger V-gouges, it works great for it. And especially this really big one works great on the large block. But for these micro tools, they're so little. This one right here is a 1.5mm U-gouge. So I could use this big one, but it's not going to do a great job just because it's so little. So micro tool, there's a sharpening block you can get specifically for these dockyard tools. And so it comes with a compound and a small brush to apply it. And basically it has the profile of all the tools cut right into this block. And so all you have to do is just find gouge 1.5, and there's a little channel that's the exact shape of this tool, the exact profile. And so you can run it through this and polish up the outside, and then it has a bumped out shape that's the exact same profile, and you can run it through there and clean up that edge. And it also has, the same thing for your V-gouges. So it's a pretty cool little tool, and it makes it a lot easier to sharpen up the dockyard tools. But any of the other tools, you can use just the regular sharpening strobe, and it'll do a great job also. And so finally, the last few things you'll need to print your actual woodcut is going to be, you'll need a brayer to go ahead and roll the ink onto the plate. You can get like a cheap one like this at the art store, or you can get a nicer one. It's really just whatever you want to buy, what you can afford. And then to print your actual image, you'll either need a printing press or you'll have to do it by hand. And in this video series, I'll show both ways to do it. So if you don't have a press, then you can use either a Baron, which is a bamboo sheath wrapped around, this one's a plastic grip, and you can apply this on top of your paper, on top of the block. Or a lot of people use a wood spoon. You can use the back of a smooth wood spoon and use that to apply pressure onto the paper. And so I'll go over both ways when I get to the printing in the next videos. Alright, so I think I got through everything in this video. Leave a comment down below if I missed anything, or if you have any questions or things you want to see as I go through this. And maybe at the end of this series I'll do like a wrap-up video to pick up some of those questions and finish it up. So again, there's going to be a link in the description box to a blog post that'll have all the materials that I used in this video, and I'll have a link to make your own bench hook here, or a link to where you can buy one if you don't want to make one. Alright, so the links over here will take you to the next videos in this series. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up when I post them, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.